Every person deserves a few basic guarantees in life: food, housing, education, medical care. The state is the body responsible for providing these basic needs to its citizens. Today, Israel's citizens are less and less capable of attaining these basic needs, which is the main issue behind the many recent demonstrations and protests. The government's response is the budget isn't big enough to cover everything. The government is putting forth an image of the budget as that of a household's. What you bring in is what you can spend. If you didn't make enough, you have to cut expenses and tighten the belt. But a household's economy is not identical to a state's economy. Who and what sets the government budget? The budget is set by fiscal policies which define the size and breadth of the budget and tax collection. How is fiscal policy set in Israel? By fiscal laws that have been drastically and systematically changed in the past decade. The first law, which was passed in 2003, is called the expense ceiling. The state budget needs to constantly grow in relation to natural population growth. The law limits the state's budget growth according to the size of the budget in the previous year. The limit on budgetary growth in 2011-2012 is 2.66% relative to the previous budget. The law ignores the natural population growth. Israel is the only country in the world that passes these kinds of laws. The second law that was changed in 2004 was the law to decrease the deficit. Sounds promising, right? Wrong. A state has revenues and expenditures. Deficit is the gap between a state's revenues and its expenditures. In the building of a state's yearly budget, there needs to be a percentage included for deficit as a budget for development and growth. This is similar to a business which invests in product development before it generates revenues. Every developed nation includes a certain percent of deficit in its budget. For instance, in 2010, France had a deficit of 8.6%. Israel currently aims to bring the deficit to 1% by 2016. By doing so, the state cannot grow on its own. The third fiscal law that was tightened in 2011 is essentially an outline for lowering direct taxes. 95% of a state's budgeted revenues is made up from taxes. It's important to distinguish between two types of taxes in the economy: direct taxes and indirect taxes. Direct taxes, scaled taxes collected in proportion to income, an example being income tax, in which a higher salary has a higher tax percentage. A person whose income is below the minimum doesn't pay direct taxes at all. Indirect taxes, collected from every citizen without regard to income size or expenses, an example being sales tax. Everyone pays the state a certain percentage of every purchase in an equal manner. The Israeli government is consistently lowering the direct taxes at the expense of indirect tax increase, which deepens inequality in society. To sum up, the expense ceiling limits the budget. The deficit is getting significantly smaller every year, and the tax burden is being saddled on indirect taxpayers, which means the middle and lower class. Nowadays, in order to reach a reasonable standard of living, a person must fulfill his basic needs out of pocket: private education for his children, private medical care for his family, expensive food, housing. If so, who is benefiting from this policy? It's good for those who have, or more accurately, those who have a lot. This situation is a product of deliberate policy to continue to widen the societal gaps. It is also possible for things to be different. Our future's not yet written. It's possible to begin to design foundations to balance the economy, building a much more just, equal, and democratic society. It all depends on our choices and our actions. Those who know and understand can be decisive, have influence, and make change. We invite you to read the litmus test document, an indicator which produces criteria for reviewing existing policy and proposed changes to the socio-economic system. This resource is presented as an invitation to dialogue by the Dror Israel movement.
אדוני הממון בעלי המדינה, אני לא מאמין לכם לאף מילה.